Hey everyone, Kelfecil here, and I'm back again today to talk about another TTRPG related topic when it comes to game design and narrative design in TTRPGs. So today we have a very interesting topic that I was actually inspired by another video to make, and I talk about this very often, but I figured that a full video on it would be so much more interesting to actually deliver some of my opinions and perspectives on how you could run an interesting game when it comes to world building, the narrative design of it all, and all that kind of stuff. I know we talk a lot about narrative design on this channel, but at the same time, sometimes it's just nice and better to just make it simple and just deliver it in one cohesive video, right? So anyway, before we move forward, the standard disclaimer as always, please keep in mind that this is just my perspective, my opinion on things, and I'm by no means the end-all be-all expert on matters of game design or narrative design, in or out of TTRPGs. So with that out of the way, I want to start by saying that today we will talk about game design basics. Basically the plot, character, and the lore. So your game has all three of those. Now, of course, the GM is responsible for all of them, but that does not mean that the players are not responsible for parts of them as well. That being said, you have players. The players are in the case of a TTRPG are basically the ones that create their backgrounds. They're the ones that bring the player characters, and they bring their own backgrounds in some ways. Of course, the GM can influence them, can help them write them and whatnot, and attach them to the grand narrative, the grand scheme of things. But at the same time, it's your players that are going to basically be living that story and basically be creating that story through their actions. So it's not just about having a cool plot with a plot twist. It's more than that. Your stories need to be meaningful and filled with things that players will actually care about. Because if there is no things for the players to care about, then you're just throwing a story out there that doesn't mean anything, and your players will not be engaged, will not be interested in actually taking part or making actions in that world. So knowing your audience when you're creating a game, and even more so when you're playing a TTRPG in this case, is very important, and even more so if they're your friends as well. So knowing your audience and what they like, how they like to play, and even if you don't know them that well, even if you're playing with them for the first time, asking a few questions, for example, on session 0, can be extremely useful for how you're going to build the world that they're going to be playing in. Now, that being said, providing an experience that is as much for you as it is for them is very important, because you cannot just make things that you're not gonna like at all just because other people will like them. So, that goes without saying, but I do need to mention it just for the sake of this. But that's basically the plot, right? Like, and the characters. There's also lore and other things, but before we move forward, I just want to say that it needs to be easygoing. If you're creating something and just making it very convoluted, then it won't land well. And at the same time, if it is without purpose, then it also won't land well. If it's too easygoing and too, like, as we say in Greek, in the flu kind of like thing, like, it's very lazy kind of in many ways. But if your purpose for playing the game is basically something as shallow as just shooting fireballs at things or becoming the strongest warrior in the realm, then your characters are going to be just as shallow, and you're not going to enjoy the game as, from the perspective of, like, you trying to make an interesting game. It won't come out this way if you start with fundamentals like that. So yeah, I am saying a lot of, like, don'ts, and you would be asking, like, why don't you say some do's here? Give us a hint here, Kelf, and I will get to those. But I am basically kind of like setting the fundamentals for, like, how you would be starting a game and what you would actually be thinking when you're making something and you want it to be something interesting. So with that out of the way, I just want to get to basically say that game writing is extremely important even when it comes to the TTRPGs. It's not just for video games, it's not just for, like, games in general, it's for everything. For games in general, well, you know what I mean. But basically, making a story that people haven't seen before, having a twist, or having something to say are the three main things that you need to consider. If you don't have any of those three things, then why are you writing a story? You need to ask yourself, why am I running this D&D campaign or whatever else TTRPG you're playing? What is the purpose of all of this? Why are they going to the Citadel? Like, why are they helping these people? So all of these little things can help you develop a narrative that basically has purpose. And I will repeat this word again and again, purpose. Because if there is no purpose in what you're doing, again, no meaning. If there is a very, very new NPC kind of like showing up in your campaign and your players meet them for the first time, how does that new NPC connect with the rest of the world? What is their purpose in alignment with the main purpose of the characters? And how does that intertwine and make things interesting? So again, the three things, like if you're not achieving one of those three things, like, with your story, then you need to reconsider some things. So of course that comes with a lot of trial and error, and you cannot expect to have something amazing from the get-go. You need to basically try a lot of things, especially with new players. You need to see what they like, how they react to things and whatnot. And that's where game design and narrative design get intertwined and like become one. And I think that this is the very important moment where I say that one of the best ways to actually deliver this kind of narrative is actually visuals. And I know I'm going very off topic here, like, hey, Kelf, you're talking about narrative design and suddenly you're saying visuals. Well, think of it this way. Mork Borg, like the ttrpg system, became very famous because it's all grungy and very rough looking. And many people don't even know how it plays, they just like how it looks, and that's what attracts them. So if you have good visuals when it comes to like the kind of game that you want to run for your players, then having the right visuals can actually already set the right, like start you on the right foot, and kind of like sets the tone in a way. So even if you do change the visuals later, although I'm very against that, like generally the aesthetics should be consistent along the way. Like if you're running a fantasy campaign, you don't want to suddenly like, kind of like turn it like full on grungy and like weird or something, So yes, the aesthetics should like kind of like stay consistent, but at the same time, like just starting on a strong note, like, with something that really delivers the idea, the feeling of like what you want to play is already a good start, like for your narrative. From there, you could even take inspiration yourself, and that's why I'm mentioning visuals, because when you're playing a Mork Borg campaign, if you're gonna make your own campaign and not running like something that exists out there that is already pre-written and like basically made for you, then you could actually take inspiration from some of the artwork that you like and work on that. So once you've taken inspiration, that's where the next and most important thing comes in, which is basically mechanics. So that will basically translate to, what do your NPCs do? How do they basically behave around the player characters? How do they work? What kind of background history do they have, and how does that sum up who they are? And how they, like, even how they talk and who they talk to, like everything matters. And basically even paying attention to how your bartender in your local tavern, like, in the starting tavern that the player characters start at, would be very important to flesh out properly. Because if they actually meet a bartender that just kind of like talks like every other kind of like bartender that you've seen out there, and kind of like, just pours beer or rum or ale or something, and that's it, then there's not much to it. You want to have your players feel that there is a purpose to this character. Maybe they're tired. Why are they tired? If they ask, like, why, if the players ask why they're tired, why the bartender is tired, you should have a decent answer. Which goes to say that, of course, a good game design generally dictates that you should have like a Bible for everything in it. You should have everything written and whatnot, like, designed and ready to go, right? Well, that's not the case. When you're playing TTRPGs, you cannot always prepare for everything. And that's where I come in and say, you cannot know what your players are going to ask, so you cannot prepare the bartender for every kind of situation that might happen. Which is why, if you're writing an adventure, you don't need to build an entire world. And you need to only connect the basic things, the basic parts that make it work. Even if your players go off the beaten path of the path that you've created, that you designed in advance, you can still have answers just based on the little notes that you have on things like the background of, like, the background story of a certain NPC and how they would act like in certain situations, or how they're feeling about the general purpose of the whole narrative. How certain locations are affected by the whole narrative. These things are more than enough for you to be able to basically come up with new things on the go, and make it even feel like you've already designed them in advance. And honestly, unless you're running a campaign, you don't really need most of these things. They don't need to feel super connected. Your ideas don't need to feel always super connected. As long as you have the basics, the fundamentals of like why you build this adventure, why there is the purpose, basically, again, the word, then you don't really need anything else. If you are playing, however, an adventure, and that is very important, what I do personally is that when I'm playing adventures, I take notes. Also when I'm writing adventures, but that's another thing. So when I'm playing, or even when writing, as I said, you basically take notes and you see for yourself, okay, this is good, Like, I could make this the purpose of another adventure that connects to something else that is related. So that basically allows you to have a more consistent narrative in your ongoing campaign, if you end up playing a campaign, of course, because if it's just a one-shot, it doesn't matter. But even when you're writing, basically it allows you to connect certain points in a way that it will make it more cohesive, it will make it like more, well, again, connected. It will make sense. The purpose would become much bigger, the picture would become much larger, right? Like there would be like this grand design kind of like thing, which in the end you'll be like, wow, did I make this? You will have this moment many times when you're making small pieces and then connecting them. Because it makes you, that's what narrative design is basically. Well, not always, but when it comes to bigger worlds, that's what narrative design is. Connecting those little pieces and being like, okay, this does make sense. If, you know, if players basically go to this quest, it will make sense why this thing is happening. And when they investigate this thing, it will make sense why this character is acting this way. So this is how the world comes together. It doesn't have to be all written down from your first adventure. It doesn't have to be all there through lore books and things like that. These are a fundamental part when it comes to game design in video games, but we're talking about TTRPGs here. Nobody's going to sit down and read like a full-on text, like, you know, halfway through your session, or even after the session. Maybe sometimes you will give them a letter or something, but I don't think you've heard many times where someone, like, you know, the DM gives a book and the players are like, oh wow, this is fantastic, I'm gonna read in my free time. Like, that never happens. Not just rarely, it just never happens. So this is, I would say, this is where a one-page cheat sheet comes in handy, because if you have certain aspects of your narrative that you think are very important, then you should write them down, even if it's just like simple words. So for example, I always like to have a notepad open when I'm playing like in online games, and I basically have it on a separate screen, and I just write down main key elements that I have, like, you know, for the adventure, for the current adventure, including other things that I will talk about in the future, in a future video, for, like, you know, having a climax, like, you know, starting strong, ending strong, if possible, and whenever possible. But I do note all the extra little narrative design elements, because I think those are good to remember. Because the moment I am thinking that, okay, they're doing this, I look back at my notepad and I'm like, these are the important things that you need to remember, Kelf. Like, these are the things that you need to try and translate through the NPCs that are talking to the characters right now. They're not always going to be talking about serious things, obviously, but it's good to have them in the back of your mind, because if they're joking with a blacksmith who just lost his daughter, let's say, like, you know, or his son, or like whoever, basically the blacksmith is all sad, there could be like a grand design that, like, you know, the grand narrative is that, you know, the nearby village is burning. Like, yeah, okay, you lost, like, you know, a member of your family, but so has everybody else. So it needs to be reflected in ways that the NPCs talk and work. So yeah, I mean, I had to take a breath, because that was a lot. I've had this all inside of me, and I was trying to, like, you know, kind of like say it in a kind of like an interesting manner, like in a constructed and also interesting manner. But anyway, that being said, I think that this is the notepad kind of method, and taking notes is one of the best ways for a DM to actually make an even more interesting narrative and make an even more interesting game for their players. So yeah, I would say that you don't need to spend 10 hours on World Anvil just world building your entire campaign's world before you actually play your campaign, before you actually start playing. I do believe that you do need to do a lot of research and actually like a lot of preparation, I would say, because being a lazy DM is just generally not, I would say, like a disservice to your players. That being said, there are a lot of people that enjoy that, so I'm not going to judge. And I do love World Anvil, by the way. World Anvil is fantastic, but at the same time, I will be completely honest to say that my criticism for it is that I would rather spend time doing my own notes and building the world in my own way, rather than just making this whole grand thing on a website where half of it might not even be used. Like, these key elements are what help you basically make the campaign and the adventure as you go. You don't need more than that. You don't need to build entire locations before the players even go there. You could have some key things for it, like, you know, some shops and whatnot. This is very useful for that purpose. But other than that, I think we end up like kind of glorifying like the whole idea of world building way too much when it comes to TTRPGs, and focusing less on the fun parts, which is actually the game and narrative design that comes through actually playing the game and understanding who we're playing it with. So anyway, that's pretty much it for today. I hope you found this video interesting, and at the same time, if you like this video, please consider leaving a like by clicking the little thumbs up button below. And if you are interested in hearing more about narrative and game design in TTRPGs, maybe some board game design videos in the future as well, then feel free to subscribe so that you stay notified when I upload more videos. I'm planning to do 2 to 3 videos a week. I'm going to start with 2 and then we'll see how it goes. And if you'd like to also support me, then you're in luck, because I actually have a Patreon and you can support me there to get a whole bunch of like fantastic releases like TTRPG stuff and whatnot, with new ones coming every month. I would like to thank my patrons for supporting me and basically allowing me to do this whole thing. Like, you know, being able to do what I love is just fantastic. So thank you so much, everyone who is supporting me on Patreon. This would not be possible without you. And until next time, may Starlight guide your way, my friends. Bye bye.